when you own one of these things, you are glad when it's gone. It's honestly, it's
I don't know about that,
like we said, no, it's like dating that crazy chick. You really enjoy the times, but you're lucky to live through a lot of them. But when she's finally gone, you got to make sure that she took her earrings, she took her shoes, she took all of her medication with her, so she has no reason to come back to your house. If you buy this car, you're not afraid of death. Because this car, with this short wheelbase and a big motor up front, is an absolute handful to drive.
8.4-liter V10 naturally aspirated, which is making, what, 645 horsepower?
And it makes a tremendous amount of earth-shattering torque.
Yeah,
and the thing is, that's the thing, and that's the thing about this car, is that when you go to drive this car, like I had an ACR and things didn't turn out real well with it. I'm one of those guys that crashed one. And good times, glad they're over. But
glad you have your foot.
Yeah, still, exactly. This car, when the torque comes on, it comes on so hard. And if you followed Formula One, I'm a big Formula One fan. Back in 1967, Lotus came out with a V8 engine that was developed by Ford. Made a tremendous amount of power, but it come on suddenly. And it made the car really undrivable at their first few races because no power, and then a ton of power come on. My Viper was the same way. You would take off with that car, and it would be slow. It would hit about 4 grand, and all of a sudden it would just start shattering the rear tires.
Yeah, shuddering, yep.
Absolutely. The thing would just be violent and hard to control. And that my car would always snap oversteer. And the Vipers, because of their short wheelbase, tended to do things like that. And that's one of the things that if you see somebody driving one of these things and driving one of these things hard, they either have a death wish, or they're a really incredible driver, or they're just really stupid.
Which is something that needs to be said, because with the ACR, you need to have an SCCA license to be able to purchase one of these, which a lot of people didn't know, and I didn't know until actually you and I met.
When I went to buy my ACR, I was sitting on the showroom floor. I went cruising in there to buy it, and the guy says, "Oh, I'd love to sell it to you, but you need an SCCA license." And I said, "Well, there you go," and off we go.
Got him.
I didn't know that you actually had to have one.
And didn't the guy that was when you first met you totally blow you off because he didn't think you were going to be able to buy it?
Totally blows me off because he figured I couldn't buy it because you needed a license. And maybe I don't look like a race car driver. I don't know. I'm not tall of stature. I thought I'd probably qualify. But the thing about these cars is that if you buy one of these cars, you really are hardcore. I mean, you go to the Viper shows, and almost everyone that you meet at the Viper shows, they've been at a track before.
Oh, sure.
They've beat on that car before, or they've beat on a car before.
And I love that about this, like in the owners of it, that it's actually being used for its actual purpose, which is neat. This has so much downforce that if you don't, it has over a ton of downforce, literally?
Oh yeah, tremendous amount of downforce on these cars. And the thing is,
it lowers the top speed.
They've got, right, well, it kills the top speed.
Crazy.
Yeah, and the thing about this car is if you take a look at the interior layout, it's stunning. It's got an absolute amazing interior.
Dodge knocked it out of the park with the interior.
It's got really beautiful seat design.
Yep.
I mean, there's really nothing bad about this car when you go to look at it from every single angle. Even if you take a look underneath of the car, there's aero underneath the car. I mean, like real aero.
I can't find any fault, honestly, about the design.
Yeah, you look at this car, even the backs of the fenders are designed to extricate all the
hood makes me want to just...
Yeah, the backs of the fenders create vacuum, and they create about 300 pounds of downforce from just the vacuum created from the backs of the fenders over the bottom of the car on the front. There's a lot of really cool stuff on this car, which is why it's so insanely fast. Because I don't want to pick on only 640 horsepower, but it only has 640 horsepower, but it's insanely fast.
Yeah, they say it's the fastest street legal track car that you can get.
And I will drink to that. Cue the whiskey, girl.
So let's talk about something that I'm not too proud of. I mean, the Viper ACR is 7 seconds a lap faster than the McLaren 720S, which I cannot believe.
You know that just kills Tony because he's a huge McLaren fan. But the thing about this car, and once again, we talked about the fact that it's only 640 horsepower. It's not a tremendous amount of power. But it absolutely smoked a 720S at the Nürburgring, which the Nürburgring is a mile-per-hour track, and this Viper with all that big old giant wing slowing the thing down, and that wing probably takes 15 miles an hour off the top end of the car. So I mean, it just kills it. But you're right. If they put active aero on that car, it would be easily into the 6-minute range. Because it ran a 7:01 with the wing not being active.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. And just saying that, like the active aero, something to me, which I don't know, maybe we should save it for later, but Dodge really needs to commit to making another Viper and maybe adding some of that active aero stuff to it.
I've had 2 Vipers now, and I've loved both my Vipers. I really, really love them. I would buy another Viper.
Now, okay, so do you remember the Viper show? They used to come out where he used to fight crime.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
the RT10,
primer gray,
and then it used to convert to a GTS. So that's where I came from. So the Viper to me, that's like RT10. That's where I fell in love with cars. I mean, I love that car. So this is just the ACR is just
the Viper's like that girl that comes at you with a bat in her hand and she says, "Do I look crazy to you?" You know, and you don't want to give her the right answer, but that craziness is if you tell her that she looks crazy, you're going to feel that bat.
Well, see, I didn't know that Vipers are crazy and that they could kill you. And then when I found out they can,
and it's part of the attraction.
I just thought okay,
yeah, it's part of the deal. Absolutely. This car is probably beyond most people's talents. As a matter of fact, when I mine, I've set track records. I've won championships in road race cars, and I'm telling you what, my ACR scared me more than any car that I've ever had.
Almost killed you.
Because because of this car, I had to drive it one-handed. Now I had the Mustang that I was racing around Daytona had a transmission problem, so I got used to driving one-handed because I used to always have to hold it into gear. And every time that I fixed the transmission, it only lasted about half a season to be popping out of gear. So I got used to driving one-handed, and that's what you needed to do with the Viper. You had to drive it one-handed because you can't catch it with 2 hands. It's too fast. Yeah, well, I'm just saying, these cars are designed for someone that has super fast reflexes. And as I get older, I know I don't have those. So I probably should stay away from the Dodge Viper.
Okay. So I should get a Dodge Viper and then you can ride with me?
And I've ridden with Tony before. There's just no way that's going to happen.
We both die.
But when you came out with the original Dodge Vipers, they'd had no ABS, they had no traction control, and mine would
no roof,
snap
no
oversteer.
Yeah, right. Locks,
I mean, and they're going to turn this loose on the general public. It's like that dog that the military just came out that has that gun attached to that robot dog.
Like the Boston.
Yeah, the robot dog with a gun attached to it. Well, what could go wrong there?
Yeah.
And that's what this thing is. They designed this thing as an absolute weapon of death. I hate to say that, but it really is. This car is not subtle.
Well, see, so the cool thing about this is that when they talked about designing this car, they wanted to make a modern day interpretation of the Shelby AC 427 Cobra. And to me, that was one of the scariest cars I've ever been in. And my buddy, you know who I'm talking about, I love that car, and it scared the shit out of me. And I think
super
that this
light,
is
super short wheelbase, they're super dangerous, and this is the
That's
same
when
way.
the
It's a
RT10
really
came out.
light
That's
car,
what it was.
Short wheelbase. It's a real dangerous car. This car is like it's. When you own one of these things, you are glad when it's gone. It's honestly, it's
I don't know about that,
like we said, no, it's like dating that crazy chick. You really enjoy the times, but you're lucky to live through a lot of them. But when she's finally gone, you got to make sure that she took her earrings, she took her shoes, she took all of her medication with her, so she has no reason to come back to your house. Because living through the Dodge Viper experience is absolutely one that you can chalk up to the books. Hey, I had a Dodge Viper, I lived through it.
I need to add that to my list.
I think like there was another TV show where they always said you had to have an Alfa Romeo if you wanted to call yourself a real car enthusiast. I think that you have to have a Dodge Viper if you really want to qualify yourself as a real car enthusiast, and if you walk away from the experience alive.
I would agree. If you're an actual car enthusiast, yeah, you need to drive one at least a few times.
Yeah, by the way, I got an experience last night. I learned something last night. Yeah.
Does your wife know?
She hasn't seen the ticket yet, but I got pulled over by a cop last night, and the cop says, "Hey, what's going on?" I said, "Some dick shining a light in my eyes." And that's how you get that's how you get a ticket for 3 miles per hour over.
Oh yeah.
So in case you're wondering, that's the only way I know of to make that happen. The short wheelbase on this car is probably its biggest problem. If they would have lengthened it just a few inches, it would have definitely changed the characteristic of the car. And they race these cars in the Trans Am series, so they definitely know about this chassis and how this thing worked. And that's The problem with this car is that there's no real way to make that a little bit longer without making it just a little more awkward.
Yeah, it
so
would
you're
be.
stuck.
That front end's so long.
You're stuck with that design. So it was right for Dodge to bail on this thing because it had absolutely outlived its design. They ran it right to the limit.
Question though, if they do come back with another Viper, do you think they'll go mid-engine, and how does that make you feel?
I have a problem with that being mid-engine, and because it takes away from the muscle carness of it. But at the same time, they have no chance of being competitive if they don't come back mid-engine. Do you hear an alarm going off? That's actually my daily job. No, I don't work at the airport. I design racing components and fuel systems and carburetors and things like that for the racing industry. So my job is to design things that push the limits of the rules. And Tony does the same thing.
Yes, sir.
Tony builds turbochargers for like the Ferraris and the McLarens and things for the racing series, and even in the regular street cars as well.
Yeah.
So
Gotta lighten them up, get them spooled
we
quicker.
definitely have lifted a few suitcases in our time, if you want to know what I mean. But this car, Dodge came out with this car, and when it came out originally, it absolutely broke all the rules. They came out with a gigantic V10, not a little small cubic inch V10. It was just a humongous sledgehammer, and they showed up at Le Mans with this thing and just kept winning and winning and winning. And finally, they just had to write the thing out of the rules because they couldn't slow it down enough. And there was just no way to do that because everyone could tell this car was absolutely a dominant force for the longest time. And then the mid-engine stuff, something happened in the mid-engine world, and they started figuring that out.
And I'm glad you went back to that because, as Patrick had mentioned, he doesn't agree with them going to a mid-engine for the Viper. And just like with the Corvette, at the beginning when they went for the C8, when they went to mid-engine, I didn't like it. I said, call it something different. It's not a Corvette. Corvettes are front engine. That's how they should be. But the name Corvette needs to live on, and it needs to continue to progress. And the mid-engine is just the progression of it. So the Viper, to me, that's a spot in American history for the car industry. It needs to, and it's more than likely going to go to a mid-engine, which, I'm excited to see what that may be, or if it does.
But the thing about this car is that when it came out, it was set 14 track records when this car came out. It was just that far
ACR.
ahead of everything when it came out. It was just stomping everybody.
It held the top gear record for a very long time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing is that this car is exactly what you talked about earlier. It's the AC Cobra of the era. Gigantic engine in a small little frame with a short little wheelbase. It'll turn, it'll go, it'll squirt, but it's a handful. And that's the thing is that times have changed, and now you have to have a car that has that same kind of power level, and it has to handle. And that's the thing that the mid-engine cars do. So that's why the Viper is not that the Viper got worse, everything else got better. And that's what happens with time. And like this car, the Viper always had that Tremec. If you've ever driven a Dodge Viper, you have to have some time on your hands in between gear changes because you can pull on that gear as hard as you want. The gears are so heavy in that car, it takes a half a second to speed that next one up so it'll even go in.
6-speed Tremec box.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Tremecs are great. Tremecs are really
unbelievably tough transmission. It's unbelievably strong. You can put 1,400 horsepower through the transmission in this car, and it'll take it. Absolutely.
It's insane.
So
It's insane.
I get it why they used it, and the thing makes so much torque that you don't need to do gear changes as much if you don't want to. You can power around a lot of corners. It's got huge tires on it. Everything about this car was right for the time and the era, but the era is gone.
Indian deer.
If you were to do this car again, I think that if you put active aero on it, I've done some calculations with this car. I think that if you took the ACR and put active aero on it, it would be around a 206 mile per hour top speed.
Well, so you're going for top speed.
Well, I'm just saying, is if you took this car, because right now it's 7 seconds a lap faster around the ring than a 720S, which has active aero on it. So it's already faster than that. Well, I'm just saying, put active aero on it. Now you've got the thing in the sixes. I think that this car had a little more life left in it if they would have just gone to active aero.
You know what? We're comparing to a 720S, which is not the track variant of the McLaren. What is this compared to the 765 LT?
Well,
because that is the ACR version of
But look at the horsepower level. The ACR is 640 horsepower versus the 720S. 715-ish horsepower range for that.
765 LT is the track variant of it. You can't. You got to compare apples to apples. You can't compare apples to refrigerators.
My whole point on this thing is that this car wasn't quite done with its moment in time because they never applied active aero to it. If they would have put active aero on this car, it would have been much quicker. Not that it was ever a slow car, but I think that there was several seconds a lap left in it with just active aero. And I think that was probably should have been its swan song. Its last iteration of this car should have been an active aero version of that, and that would have really made this thing good.
That sounds like a great thing for SEMA guys that are trying to. What's the next thing to do?
No,
let's do some active aero for the old ACR.
The time for the ACR is done. I think that this is a fantastic moment in time. These cars are holding tremendous value, probably always will. They're insanely reliable. They're absolute sledgehammers. You have to
wait. But you're saying that the 765 LT is better than the ACR?
I'm saying
right?
it could potentially be a better car, but I'm just saying that for its moment in time, the ACR made way more of a statement than any of these other cars. It came out and absolutely angered everyone when it just started stomping.
For a fraction of the price.
For a fraction of the price. Absolutely. All right, I think it's time. I hear a squealing noise. When the 5th generation ACRs came out, immediately I called the car out saying it was a butterface. I didn't like it. I didn't like that whole nose look. Without the ACR on it, it's like the T50. When I saw the T50, I immediately didn't like the T50. But I knew that he would come out with the racing version of it with all the splitters and all the canards on it, and it would look stunning. And it does. I mean, that Lauda T50S, I think it's called, or R, is amazing, stunning car. And the same thing happened with the Viper. When they did the ACR version of the Viper, all of a sudden it got amazing.
So SRT10, right, is what you're talking about?
Well, no, I'm talking about when they came out with the 5th generation version, like the very first ones, without the splitter, without the canards. It was a butterface, and I called it out for being a butterface, and I got a lot of heat for it. But I didn't like it, and I still don't like it. But I do like it once you go to the ACR, because the shape of the car begs for those parts to be on there.
I don't know. I guarantee you, if I pull up in a regular Viper, Patrick's gonna get a smile on his face.
All right, I'm not gonna lie about that. I would, but I would really, but I would ding it 10 points in styling. And I gave this a really good styling rating because I really think it's an attractive as an ACR, the ACR version. I think it's a really attractive car, and I'm really biased towards the ACR, so I'm gonna pull my number back a little bit and try to be the average Joe's response because mine is gonna be a higher on a personal level. But I'm trying to be average Joe on what people say, and I bet people say this is about a 70.
Oh, really? Yeah. Because, I mean, you kind of like the Viper.
I do. I'm a huge fan, and I would really love to have another one, but I've already got a bad limp, so I really don't know if I can afford one.
Well, although I almost lost a friend over it, which I'm glad he's still here.
Yeah, good
Yeah, I love the Viper. I always have. The ACR is amazing to me, especially this new one, with or without the ACR package. I give it a 77 because it's just,
good.
I love it.
That's about where I wanted to be without being unbiased. In performance, there's a lot of cool stuff on this. Now, the thing is if this Viper has a oil pressure controlled variable valve timing through the camshaft. The camshaft split so that it has a really good clean idle on the thing.
I heard by my calculations.
I know that exactly. But the thing is if you get one of these Vipers, the first thing you need to do is yank that cam out of there and put a really good cam in it because these things sound like one of the best engines that you'll ever hear in your life when you put a good camshaft in them and get rid of that variable valve
So
timing.
if the side exit exhaust doesn't do it for you,
you get rid of that cam. Get rid of that cam. Put a really good cam in this thing. You will have one of the best exhaust notes out there, period. Because I love that VVT for getting that good low idle, but I hate it for the idle quality because it sounds like an old tractor. It really does. That was the biggest problem that I had with my ACRs. It sounded like an old tractor. But you yank that factory cam out of there and put one in there that's got a good amount of duration on it. It's got a really killer thump. It'll be one of the best sounding engines that you'll ever hear in your life.
That original muscle car sound.
In performance, and I'm going to go light on performance on this as well. I know it set a whole ton of track records and it's really fast, but it's really fast for the era. So I'm going to give it in performance. I'm going to give it a 70. So it's square. It's 70-70.
Okay. Well, I'm not far off because I gave it a 70 as well, just because of what it is. I mean, this is a track monster.
Right.
So this set the bar for a lot of cars and held records and still holds a lot of records. So.
Well, what are you doing? You giving it a toast?
Oh, totally giving it a toast.
Congratulations, Dodge. From us, you've got a toast. Well, thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. And you know what they say, if you have an opinion that's different than ours, keep it to yourself.